All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Route Consultant weekly webinar. For those of you, it's your first time here. I'm Leah Nelson. I work on the education team here at Route Consultant. I primarily work with financials and business analysis in all of our different sectors and silos and checking out market trends, figuring out what business is worth, and really anything under that umbrella. For all of our regular attendees, welcome back. Whether you're brand new to the industry or you've been a contractor since the RPS days, we want these webinars to be a place to learn, have a little bit of fun, and help get all your questions answered. So before we get started, I do have to read a quick disclaimer, as we do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by, is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So all this means is that you won't hear any material non-public information today, but we do hope that you learn some good stuff either way. So just another quick note for all of our viewers today, we will have time at the end of the webinar for a Q&A session. Whether you want to submit a question about today's topic or really any other topic in the space, submit those questions and we'll get those answered. I will say, do submit those questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Please do not use the chat feature. If you use the chat feature, I probably won't see the question. And I probably won't get it answered, but if you toss it in the Q&A section, I definitely will see it and we'll get your questions answered. So today, our topic is going to be Linehaul spots, anything and everything about that. It'll be a fun one. And we've got Alex here today, who is our kind of resident Linehaul expert here at Route Consultant. He's been in the Linehaul space for quite a while now, has a really big operation, and is continuing to grow all the time. So with that, we'll go ahead and welcome Alex.
Hey, thanks, Leah. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
So spots. So I kind of think of spots as kind of like the Dr. Seuss part of the contract that FedEx has, because there's not one set answer. Spots are rarely ever not on your A1 until they are. Spots are generally paid as spots until they're not, and then they're paid as linehaul runs. Spots are generally run out of stations until they're run out of hub areas. So, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility and variability to spots. What it is a spot is very, very different from your typical line haul run. So when we're talking about, so we're going to use the example to start off with the hub area. Okay, so the hubs are the main distribution centers of the FedEx universe. Think of them as like the hub and spoke model that you have in Southwest. So the hubs are where a lot of the freight comes in, gets redistributed, and then gets reallocated to different trailers, and then gets shot out back across the network to other hubs. So each hub has a hub area that they collect freight from. Okay, in the hub area, what you have is you have a senior line haul manager who runs line haul operations, and then you have a P&D manager who runs P&D operations, and then you have actually somebody called a hub manager who runs hub operations. So the hub manager is in charge of the docks and sorting facilities and et cetera, et cetera. The senior line haul manager obviously is in charge of line haul, and the P&D manager is in charge of the P&D, the pickup and delivery. Most people tend to think that, the delivery vans go out every day and they deliver packages and they collect packages, and that's where most of the freight comes. And while a lot of freight and a lot of volume does come into the network that way from P&D operators picking up packages from businesses, a tremendous amount of freight is actually picked up by core customers of FedEx who actually have spotted trailers, hence the name Spot, at their location that they will fill throughout the day. And then line haul contractors will go out and pick up those trailers. They'll usually do a swap where they bring in an empty trailer and they'll drop it off in the yard and then collect this filled trailer and bring it back to FedEx. And they'll do these over and over again, depending on a set schedule, however time Acme, Rubber Bullets or Rubber Duckies wants to fill up their trailers. Now, the one thing to understand in this situation is that it's not the senior line haul manager generally identifying and allocating those spots. It's the P&D manager who is going to allocate those spots. And so as a contractor, you don't only need to have a good relationship with your senior line haul manager. If you want to do spots, you need to have relationships with your P&D manager. But like I was saying, it's a Dr. Seuss kind of opportunity, so P&D managers generally manage the spots until they don't, when the senior line haul manager might actually have some spots that they can allocate as well. So it does happen from time to time. I've done spots through Linehaul instead of doing them through P&D, and I've done spots through P&D. The one thing to remember is that um, spots are generally not on your A1, so they're not going to be assigned. So they're kind of this gray area of the contract and this gray area of your business. While they generate a tremendous amount of revenue, there is no guarantee that the spot is going to transfer when it moves from, your contract or from the seller to the buyer. More often than not, it does, but it's not guaranteed unless it's on your A1. Now, when you think about it, so say we're taking Acme rubber, rubber duckies. So Acme Rubber Duckies contracts with FedEx, and they say, you know what, I need 5 trailers picked up on a daily basis. So you might be given a relationship to manage with Acme Rubber Duckies, where you're going to pick up 5 trailers throughout the day and deliver 5 trailers to them. Now, and the other thing is that a lot of times, because of your relationship and how strong it is with that, and your driver's relationship with Acme Rubber Duckies, they might call you at times directly instead of going through P&D and say, hey, we got a rush shipment. We need a 6 trailer today. So that's something to be aware of, that while FedEx owns the relationship with Acme Rubber Duckies, a lot of times they'll actually talk to you as a contractor, or talk to your BC, or talk to your driver more frequently than they talk to FedEx. So that's something to be aware of when you're considering this. I'm going to get to how stations handle spots in a little bit, but let's talk about how you get paid. Okay, so spots can be paid in one of 2 different ways. They can either be paid as a set price for the spot, and that's a calculation that the engineers in PGH will do. And it's usually a combination of what they think the per mile rate would be, how many packages they think they're picking up, and how many drops and hooks. And they might just give you, say, you're going to do this spot for $150. Okay. Or it could be constructed as a line haul run, where you'll get paid the 20 miles to go out and pick up that trailer. You'll get paid a drop and hook for dropping a trailer and hooking up a new trailer and then bringing it back to FedEx. So one of the things that you should do and should look at and analyze when you're looking at your spots is determining, okay, what is probably the more profitable option, and then working with your line haul manager to understand, how it makes sense to get you paid. FedEx does have a little bit of flexibility of determining if they're going to pay it as a spot, or pay it as pay it as a P&D spot, or pay it as a line haul run. Stations are very, very different. Okay. Stations, you have a senior manager. More often than not, that senior manager is specifically a P&D guy who's not super familiar with line haul. So a lot of the line haul functions that are handled in that station are actually rerouted up to the hub manager. So say you are in Denver and you're working out of the Henderson terminal, and you happen to have a spot in Kremling, Colorado. Well, Kremling's this tiny little station. They might not know how to do a tractor file or anything like that, but they might have a lot of spots in and around the area for customer pickups. And so there might be 1 or 2 line haul tractors stationed there that are, shuttling trailers out there and bringing them back to the station. And then maybe they're getting picked up by by Henderson and taken back to Henderson. Or maybe what you're going to do is you're going to do a triangle where you go from Kremling to the customer, to the terminal in Henderson, and go back to Kremling with an empty, and then go back home. So there might be multiple, legs to this run. And that's, that's a relationship and a construction that has to be between you and the senior manager at that station. The advantage, the attractiveness about doing station work is, a lot of times if you go into a station, they might be like, hey, they're always looking for line haul assistant, because a lot of times they don't have a line haul contractor in there. And so they're trying to get their P&D guys to do line haul business. And a lot of P&D guys don't want to do it. It's not their comfort area. It's kind of scary buying a $175,000 tractor when you've been buying, $50,000 to $60,000 delivery vans. Maybe they've gotten a box truck, but they're really, the whole idea of having to have a CDL and understand hours of service and all these different components of being a line haul operator is kind of scary for a lot of CSA or P&D contractors. So the opportunities for you to look around your AO. So say you operate in KCMO, right? So look around the stations in the hub area, and you might have the opportunity to go out to, Grand Island, or, South Platte, or go to Omaha and say, hey, I'm a line haul contractor out of KCMO. I have some additional power, I can provide. Do you have any spots that you're looking to do? And what that does is that they'll give you some spots to run out on a temporary basis. It's one way to add additional money to your contract, but two, a lot of times those station managers then have the ability of, like, when a line haul actual run opens up, they don't generally have to bid it out. They can just go to the line haul contractors in their station. And if you're the only contractor in their station, then, they can just award it straight to you. Then finally, the last thing to think about with spots is, like, say you have a short run. Say you're going from, like, King of Prussia to Scranton, Pennsylvania and back. And that's a very short run. It might be only like a 200-mile run. Well, this is an opportunity where you can go to the station manager in Scranton or the station manager in King of Prussia and say, hey, I really can't make enough money on this run to pay a driver a living wage. Do you have any spots that I can add to the front of the run or to the back of the run? And a lot of times the P&D or the P&D managers or the station managers in those situations will be very open-minded. In a hub area, it's a different story, but in stations, there's a lot of opportunities to be flexible and to think outside the box about ways that you can construct your runs to generate additional revenue. And that's how you get, that 200-mile run that, no one really wants to do, and you can't really find a driver to run. Well, if you talk to that P&D manager, he might be able to get you a spot or two at the beginning and a spot or two at the end. And now all of a sudden that you have a 200-mile run with a couple of spots that might take you 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. And all of a sudden you have a run that's generating the type of revenue that a 500-mile run might. So that's something to think about with spots. The negatives of spots, if they're not on your A1, they don't generate any points. Okay, so only tractors that are on your A1 will generate points. So these are tractors that, but also by extension, you can't get assessed failures on this. So you won't get availability declines or service declines on your spots. What will happen though is that if you piss off the customer, they're going to complain to FedEx, and FedEx will take away those spots from you and give them to somebody else. So, there's advantages and disadvantages to it. Understand that if you're taking on the responsibility of running spots for FedEx, they're going to expect 100%, service of this thing, or otherwise you're going to find a contractor that can. So it's really, really, really important to understand that you cannot take failures in this area.
Perfect. I have a couple questions myself.
Sure.
So you mentioned tacking spots onto kind of the shorter runs. Is there a situation where you would have a truck that just does spot runs? Is that common?
Yeah, so I've done that in the past where I've gone to the P&D manager and strung together. I'm like, hey, I have a tractor I can make available to you, and I have a driver I can make available to you from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning. And they've come back to me and said, okay, well, I can give you these 11 spots to do. I need to do, and they're all time stamped. And they'll be like, I need you to be at customer A at 7 p.m. I need you to be at customer B at 8 p.m. I need you to be a customer C, D, E, and F. I need you to pick up one trailer from them and drop off a trailer between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. And then I need you to drop off this full trailer at this customer at 6 a.m. in the morning. And they'll kind of construct something like that. And then you work with your BC and your driver to say, okay, this is how we're going to organize those 4 spots that don't really have a timestamp on them. But that's what we're going to do. And so it becomes like a string of spots that you do, and it generates great revenue. And in those situations, what I've typically done is I pay those drivers on an hourly basis, or I'll pay them as on a per spot. And typically the going rate for drivers in this kind of situation is maybe like $30 to $35 an hour, depending on, what the situation is, what market you're in. Or, an easy way to kind of do it is think about, you don't want to pay any more than about 33% of the revenue of the spot. So if the spot makes $100, then you want to pay your driver about $33, $30 to $33 for that one spot. The rest goes to support your infrastructure, your SG&A, the truck payment, the fuel, insurance, FICA, all the different things that you have to cover for yourself. So that's a good way to think about it. You don't really ever want to spend or pay more than about 30 about a third of your revenue to a driver to cover a spot for yourself. And so it's quite frequently. You talk to a lot of heavy spot guys will run multiple spots in an evening, and they'll set it up as a run.
Yeah.
And then, for example, like I used to do a run where I would do it was a very short run. It was 390 miles round trip, and it allowed my driver. It took my driver like 6.5 hours to do the run, and so at the end of her run, she was a female driver. She would take an empty trailer up to a customer and bring back a loaded trailer. Um, and that one actually was paid as a line haul run, not as a spot run, because that's how we had structured it. And it was a little bit longer. It ended up being like 50 miles that she had to drive to the customer to pick up this trailer and bring it back. And it worked out great.
Yeah. My next question was about pay, so you answered that. That was good. Do most spots, do they have it mostly like during the day or at night or like a mix of both, just depending on the customer?
It depends on the customer. It can be anywhere from, I would say I mean, it really depends on the customer. If you think about the construction of the different, like what the customer is doing. I mean, if they're running multiple shifts in their business, if they're running a first shift, a second shift, and a third shift, and that's a spot that you're going to be servicing all throughout the day, right? So, their third shift is getting done. They might be loading up trailers, so you might do 3 to 6 different pickups in that point. And what I mean by first shift, second shift, third shift, this is a factory that's running, they have a work day from 8 to what is an 8-hour workday? So it would be 8 till 4, and they have a workday from 4 to midnight, and then they have a workday from midnight to 8.
Mhm.
A lot of pharmaceuticals run triple shifts like that. Some some of the suppliers for the auto manufacturers or for the Defense Department or for the airlines run 3 shifts like that. So you could see, you're going to pick up, wire harnesses in the middle of in Schaumburg, Illinois, and then you're running them to the hub area in Willow Springs. You might do multiple, shifts there, or it might be actually run out of Carroll Stream. And so you're running, instead of going into the hub area, you're going up to the station in Carroll Stream, dropping off the trailers there, and then somebody else is doing the relay between Carroll Stream and Willow Springs.
Mhm.
FedEx has all of these different ways to set up and how they want to structure it.
Yeah.
And also where the salesperson that FedEx has that's going to that covers that customer.
Right. So I know spots, of course, can be, they're a great addition to your portfolio. They can make a lot of money. Is there ever a point where you would have, I would say, like too many spots, like too large of your portfolio is spots? Is that ever a thing?
Well, I mean, I think the big concern that you have in that kind of situation is if you can't get them onto your A1, then you're always going to have that nervousness when a seller or when a buyer's coming into the business and making sure that those spots are going to transfer over. I mean, some of the most successful contractors I know started off in P&D as as a one guy in a delivery van. They made the transition over to CDLs, and they've grown their business up to just doing spots. I mean, there's
Hmm.
some contractors out there that run 40 or 50 trucks a night. All they're doing is just spots, picking up, they're doing, I mean, there's this one contractor, I think she or he, I guess now, has 44 trucks that are averaging between 8 to 10 spots a night. And so
Wow.
he's, it's a lot of business, and some of those businesses run 6, 7 days a week, and they're working, and so he's having to balance, making sure all those guys get pickups, but he also has phenomenal relationships with those vendors, and so a lot of times FedEx will be like, "Oh, we expect you to go do your pickups on Easter,"
Mhm.
and customer will be like, "No, I gave all my guys off for Easter. There's not going to be anybody here,
Yeah.
come in." So, it's in. I would say the most successful contractors who run spots have very strong relationships with their customers. And they are specifically coming out and they're going out to see their customers where their spots are and saying, "Hey, I'm the guy who owns the truck. I'm the guy who employs the driver that's picking up these trailers for FedEx. What can I do better for you? How can I make your life easier? You know, I know it's supposed to be a no-touch freight. Do you want me to back this trailer up to your dock for you? You know,
Hmm.
is this a better, where do you want me to put the trailers? Give me a specific location and I'll put them there for you. Doing whatever you can to, being that front facing contact for that customer is how you get that customer to be on your side. and go to bat for you and say, you know what, I'm going to have that strong relationship. And when I'm looking to grow, I'm not going to go to one of FedEx's competitors. I'm going to keep it in house because I really love dealing with Joe Schmo, because Joe Schmo always hooks me up and takes care of me. So.
Yeah. Success of spots, I would say, is largely relationship management, and it is a lot of things in life are, but I think that's a little bit different than just your standard runs. Is making sure you've got that really good relationship and making sure you keep your spots that way. So,
and you can make a P&D manager or the senior manager at a station's life, golden. If you have a strong relationship with your customers, then that takes something off that P&D manager or that station manager's shoulders that they don't need to worry about. And they know that you have that covered.
Yeah, and then that strengthens that relationship too. So good, good news all around.
Definitely.
Perfect.
So, so I think spots are great. I will say during peak season, you do pick up a lot more spots. So you'll see, if you're a guy who's doing 3 spots a day, you might double to 6 spots a day, or you might do 10. The one nice thing about spots is the miles that you run, even if you're getting paid as a spot and not as a line haul, the miles that you're running get calculated for the peak incentives. And so you'll get the miles bonuses, and the peak bonus is set by, exceeding your miles threshold.
That's good to know. Well, rephrase. If you do, you have the increase in spots during peak season, are you allowed to decline those, or do you have to take them?
No, you can decline them. I mean, you don't have to take them. You're generally putting a lot of station managers into a significant amount of stress at that point, though, because in those situations, a station manager probably, if you're the single station if you're the only line haul contractor in Rock Island, Illinois, and that's a shout out to Mike, who I think is the only contractor in Rock Island, Illinois. He's the relationship guy, and he's, the P&D manager, the senior manager in Rock Island is just all into Mike, and Mike's success and the station's success are symbiotic. And so when one sinks or swims, the other one sinks or swims. So, when the customer comes to Mike and says, "Hey, I'm going to need 8 spots instead of my 4," you really kind of have to bend over backwards and give them that.
Yeah.
And and vice versa, the station is going to protect you and make sure that, that only, he's going to do everything he can to make sure that you're treated like, the king that you are in that station.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have any more questions right now about spots. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we kind of jump into some other stuff?
No, I mean, right now everybody should be spending a lot of time working on replacing the logos on their tractors. It's April 24th. June 1st, all tractors are required to have operated by Federal Express Corporation on their sides with the new DOT number. Remember, if you submit the tractors right now, keep track of them. Submit those photos into your station management, into your line haul management, because FedEx is paying out $100 incentive for every tractor that you relogo. I've been all over it, and I just got my last 3 tractors done today, so I'll be submitting those as soon as I get off the phone with you.
Perfect. Yes, definitely a good reminder there. Well, if anybody has any questions for the Q&A, go ahead and submit those in the Q&A function, not the chat. And in the meantime, I will read just a couple of updates here for everybody. So we do have one new listing this week. It's out of Northern Georgia. It's 7 P&D routes listed at $1.25 million, which is right at about 100% of revenue. It does have a really high margin at a 34%, which is quite impressive. 2 spare trucks, a full-time manager on staff, low daily miles. I believe it was around 80 per day. And it also has some assumable truck debt. If anyone is interested in that listing, that will be on our website. And then we've got a couple of events coming up as well. So first, we've launched our virtual new investor summit a little while ago. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that on our website. If you do purchase the virtual summit, it also includes a ticket. You get to come to one of our in-person workshops at our Nashville office and meet the RC team and just get any questions you've got answered in an in-person setting, which can also always is really nice. We also have our next one for that is on May 24th. So if you sign up between now and May 24th, you are welcome to come to that in-person workshop. And then we've got some, later in the year as well, if May 24th does not work for you. We also have our 2024 happy hour schedule posted on our website. The next happy hour is in New York on May 14th. So anybody up in the Northeast kind of New York area, we'd love to see you there for that. And as always, we've got our annual expo, our biggest event of the year in Dallas, Texas, from August 2nd to 4th. It's always a really great time. I personally love the expo. We get to meet everybody, which is just super, super fun. You get to meet other people in the industry and vendors, and it's just a really, really good time and a great time to learn as well. We do have a room block at the Gaylord Texan. So go ahead and book your room for that. They do run out pretty quickly. So go ahead and get that in. It's a discounted rate for those rooms. So if you're coming to the expo, go ahead and book those rooms, and we're excited to see everybody there. That's it for my announcement. So let's see if we have any questions. All right, so we've got Michael who said he's new to the space. Welcome. How much capital is needed to get into Linehaul, and what are the average margins?
So I'll give you a perfect example of my experience. I started off way back when with 4 trucks. I ended up buying the 4 trucks and 4 routes for a little bit over $800,000 at the time, and I put 20% down. I did not go the SBA route. I went through bank financing just because I wasn't buying a standalone business. I was buying a carve out from another contractor. And as Leah can tell you, it is kind of challenging to get a carve out approved by the SBA.
Yes.
If you go through the SBA, I've actually never done an SBA deal because of that, because once I got my 4 routes and I've grown otherwise through carve outs, it's never been an option for me, but I've always gone the bank financing route. I actually did have a bank offer me, I think they offered me below 20% financing once on a down payment, but they wanted me to like sign away or collateralize it with my next unborn child, my house, and a couple other things, and I kind of stayed away from that. So yeah, 20% minimum. I would say you really want to buy at a minimum. If you can, I would probably go at least 3 runs, if not 4. You want to try to get to that point of doing. I'm going to put it in line haul terms. You want to try to get to that point of doing at least 7,500 to 10,000 miles a week, because at that point you can hire a BC who's going to manage the business for you, and you can be if you don't have your own CDL or don't have that kind of experience. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people that bought larger. I consulted on a business or on a contractor who's out of Connecticut and Massachusetts. I think he ended up his first foray into the business. He ended up buying a business with 1 BC and 11 runs in 3 different states out of 3 different terminals, and he's crushing it now. I think he's up to 15 trucks. I just consulted on a guy who ended up buying 6 runs, 4 in Olive Branch, 2 in Memphis, or might be the other way around. And he's looking to grow. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. It's just, what is your capital and what your confidence is. I would say margins, historically, it all depends on, the larger you grow, surprisingly, the greater your margins are going to be, because you have a set number of fixed costs that don't change. Like if I have a manager, the going rate for a BC doesn't change if I have 4 trucks or if I have 11 trucks. I'm still paying that manager pretty much the same rate. And so, and the trucks, the more miles you put on those trucks, you have a sunk cost of what the truck is, but the more miles you put on it expands your margins. So I would say at the low end, you're probably looking at, 15% margins. At the high end, I've had some years where I'm at 28%. Right now, I'm lower than that. I'm averaging around 22%. But that's also because I have a large SG&A staff so I can work on my business and not work in my business, and allows me to do things like, hey, be on webinars. And if you haven't noticed, I do a lot of webinars. So for me, I need to have a lot more staff on board to do that. I enjoy being on video. I enjoy helping other contractors. I do a lot of consulting work. So I have probably one more manager than I necessarily need to have, but that gives me peace of mind that all my business is running. I can tell you right now, like I just bought 4 runs. I've had 3 conversations with my managers today. One of my HR manager who, finalized and got all my drivers ready to go run tomorrow morning because that's the stand-up date for these 4 runs. And my other 2 managers are busy making sure, all the drivers are married up with the trucks, walking them through how we operate, how do you log into Omnitrax, how we do backing and hooking up, what are the standard operating procedures for my company. And I haven't really been deep in the woods with it. They know my objectives, they know the goals, they know how we run our business, and they're handling it all themselves.
Perfect. Yeah, kind of to add on to the capital part, hopping back to that, because we just briefly mentioned the SBA. It does depend on what your financing capabilities are, how much you need to bring to the table. I know the SBA requires a minimum 10% down payment in most cases. So you can have as little as 10%. It's not necessarily recommended in most cases. I think 20% is generally a better benchmark than 10%, but it can be done. So the higher the down payment, the better. And if you're kind of wanting to go down the conventional financing path, it's even a little bit higher than that. 20% is decent, but closer to 30 or 40 if you wanted to do a more conventional lending path, can be good as well. And then of course, if you do cash, you would need the full amount for cash. But so yeah, really evaluate your goals from a financing perspective on that, and that'll help you know how much capital you need from the outset. And then you want to have a little bit of money saved up as well, just kind of a spare funds. When you get started, you don't want to exhaust all of your money into your down payments and things like that. You want to have money on hand for when you start the business. So you've just got, you've got extra until you start generating a lot of money. And then margins as well depend on, and I think Alex, you can back this up too, your portfolio composition. So if you've got solo runs tend to make a little bit less money, team runs generally make a little bit more. So if you've got mostly solo runs, you'll be kind of on the lower end of that margin. If you've got mostly team runs, you'll be on the higher end of that margin. Yeah. So think about that as well when you're looking at different line haul businesses.
But I mean, there's also a function so one of the reasons why I also have lower margins, like I've changed my business and the portfolio of runs that I have. So when I first started out in the business, I had a lot more team runs. Team runs are very stressful for me. I'm constantly recruiting, constantly looking for drivers. And so now I've switched my portfolio construction to where I'm predominantly solo runs. So I have 26 solo runs and only 6 team runs. Yeah. So that gives you an idea of like how my structure has changed over time and what I'm looking at right now. So that's another reason, to Leah's point, like you said, about where my margins have compressed because I'm not so heavy teams. And that's just a lifestyle choice on my part. I know a contractor out of Colo, he absolutely kills me with his margins and he's always bragging to me about how well he does, but he runs 40 teams. I can't compete with that. But he, that's what he wants and that's the structure that he wants. And I think the largest contractor in our space, that I can think of might only run teams. If I'm talking about the guy that's down in Texas, he might run like 100 or 150 teams. I mean, and he started off with, I think he started off with like just 5 trucks. So he's grown, a lot over the last decade,
Yeah, that's a lot of growth. Yeah, teams definitely come with their challenges. So you may get a couple, a little bit higher margins, a little bit more money there, but definitely more stress trying to get 2 people who want to be in the truck together all the time. Yeah. Perfect. Well, we've got the next question here. We've got Aldo, who is also new to the space. 2-part question here. So with the upcoming changes by FedEx, do you foresee any struggles for new investors wanting to get into the line haul business? Is the first part of the question. And the second is, would you recommend starting with a big project or something smaller for someone looking to invest? Which we kind of touched on that a minute ago, but we can go more in depth.
I mean, I'll start off with question number 2 before I start with question number 1. So I think unless you're going to be the investor route and you're going to buy, like you're big enough to be like a family office, something like that, where you can spend $2 to $5 million on a really strong business that has BCs and you don't need to really be involved in the business on a day-to-day basis. I think it makes more sense to start off small and learn. Like I said, I mean, I'm at 36 or 35 trucks now. I started off with 4. There are growth opportunities. You have plenty of opportunities to grow organically and grow through acquisitions. I've done both in my career. I've grown both organically and inorganically. Right now, I'm growing inorganically. I'm acquiring 4 runs just because I saw an opportunity where I could add some business to where I already have a strong operation. And for me, it's like I already have a manager in place there. So putting a little bit more on his plate is not going to be all that complicated and not going to stress him out as much. So that's something to think about. Like I probably would not have done the purchase if it had been outside of one of my hubs. So I
Mhm.
operate out of 3 hubs. I have managers in each of my hubs. And so if it was 4 runs in, middle of nowhere, Montana, given that I operate out of Memphis, Olive Branch, and Noki, that wouldn't have been strategic for me. So that's something to think about. But I think starting off with 4 to 8 runs, starting off between 7,500 and 15,000 miles a week, that's a good place for where you can really learn the business and understand. And you need to spend a good 6 months to a year understanding how the business works. There's so many different components to it. A lot of guys wanted to try to go the cheap route and go through build a ground biz and volunteer to take on some unassigned runs. And I think they've struggled because they really didn't understand what they were getting themselves into. And unassigned runs is like you're in the major leagues. So if I think about it, like managing a business that's made up of AM or PM dedicated solos is like graduating from high school. It's not that complicated. Anybody that has a high school diploma can pretty much do it.
Mhm.
You just have to be able, you have to be able to use QuickBooks. You have to be able to figure out how to, reach out to a lawyer, reach out to an accountant, and they can pretty much handle everything for you. All
Mhm.
you got to do is just provide the financing to buy the trucks. FedEx is going to dispatch your drivers, so there's not a whole lot for you to do there. Um, Doing teams is the next order of business harder. Okay. So doing teams means that you have 2 drivers in a truck. You have to recruit 2 drivers. The runs are longer. You have to deal with, mommy daddy issues. You have to deal with husband and wife issues. You have to deal with brother, 2 brothers issues, all sorts of different complications with the 2 drivers in the truck. I can tell you horror stories about, when 2 drivers don't get along. So it's the next order of business. And then you've got the unassigned. Okay. So the unassigned, you don't know what you're running. Every morning it's a wild card. You're throwing darts at a wall. You don't know if you're getting a run that morning. You don't not you might be getting a run, you might not be getting a run. You might be getting a run that's great. You might be getting a run that is crap. You might be getting a lay down run. You might be getting, a through run. You don't know what you're getting. So it just adds to the complexity of it. And then you have unassigned teams, which is the hardest thing in the world. You have to convince 2 drivers that, hey, I can't guarantee you to work every day, but I need you to show up to work every day. I need you to, it's just brutal. So, um, buy a good business, contract with that manager or that the seller to stick on for 3 months to six months to teach you how to run the business. And then at that point, you're going to be smart enough and knowledgeable enough, and you've survived a peak, and you can go out on your own and grow your business. So that's my suggestion. Now, to point one, um, look, I'm buying. I'm a buyer of the business right now. I haven't done anything since the pandemic. During the pandemic, I grew organically. And then after the pandemic ended, I kind of sat around the business, looked at it and said, you know what, I grew a lot organically. I'm going to sit back and not buy anything more right now. And I'm going to consolidate my business. I'm going to strengthen my operating procedures. I'm going to do some coaching and some teaching and mentoring of my managers. And then as things kind of got like, it's been a little bit slow, I saw this as a great opportunity to grow because I still believe in the FedEx model. I still believe that there's going to be more opportunities for us going forward. And the One FedEx initiative um, is going to be positive for Linehaul. Um, I don't know how it's going to impact P&D, and I'll leave that to, Leah and Josh and P&D experts to talk about what's going to happen in the P&D space with One FedEx. On the Linehaul side, it's a positive. FedEx Ground is a cheaper business model than FedEx Express to take packages. So what you're seeing anecdotally right now is line haul contractors having to get their TSA security clearances for some of their drivers to do some of the Federal Express typical historical package pickups at airports and stuff like that. Additionally, I think that you're going to see more opportunities for FedEx to take volume that historically has gone on airplanes and said, hey, this is only 2-day delivery. We don't really need to fly it from Indianapolis to Memphis. Why don't we just put it on a truck instead of flying it? And, you're going to see that. The other thing is, you might see, um, other areas where there might be timestamp delivery. So we might get more hot loads on the URR schedule over time. So there's a lot of different things, but, in general, I think that we'll probably historically FedEx probably grew really rapidly during the pandemic, and now we're kind of dealing with the hangover a little bit. So I think a lot of the growth that FedEx experienced during the pandemic was from 2024, 2025, and 2026 projected growth that was brought forward. So this year, I would expect my miles to probably be up 2 to 3%. I think my miles next year are probably going to be up 2 to 3%, and I think there's going to be real growth in the network in probably 2026. But there are some contractors who I think we're going to get a lot of growth in 2025 as the Federal Express merger, or Federal Express Corporation and the One FedEx initiative goes through, and there's opportunities for those guys in like Indianapolis or in where the air hubs are. There are going to be more opportunities for those contractors to grow faster than guys like me who are based in Noki, Nashville, or Memphis and Olive Branch.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it made sense to me. So perfect. So we got a couple more questions here. It says for unassigned solo runs, does it get to the point where you have to pay drivers even when there are no runs available? So do you pay the drivers even if there's no unassigned run? Is it common for that to happen?
So there's a lot of different ways that guys will go through doing this. I know a contractor who only uses part-time drivers. He actually does. A lot of firefighters are Class A CDL holders, and so to drive a ladder truck, or to drive there's a ladder truck, and then there's like the water truck, I think.
Maybe that sounds right.
That sound like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the ladder truck and the water truck. And both of those require a CDL. So he gets a lot of firefighters who are part-timers because their primary job is to be a firefighter, and they work, I think as a firefighter, you work 3 days on, 4 days off, or maybe it's 4 days on, 3 days off. So he has a bunch of them who work for him. And so he just uses part-time firefighters to cover his AM unassigned solos. I'm a big enough operation where I actually I floor my drivers, so I guarantee them a minimum number of miles a week. But I require them that they have to come in to what I call the office on a daily basis, and they have to log in. And then I use them. If they're not getting a run, then my manager uses them to help, shuttle trucks between maintenance facilities, take trucks out to go get their truck washed, do PMs on trucks to make sure that, the other drivers haven't skipped on their PMs, so I make use of them for what they're doing. I mean, I'm paying them, essentially I'm paying them a day's rate to show up to work. I'm going to use them for doing other stuff. Actually, today, for example, we filmed the proper way to back up to a trailer, and we're going to show that video to my drivers. So
Yeah.
my unassigned driver and my manager, that's what they were working on. It's the proper way to back up to a trailer. So
That's great. That's a great use of of your spare people. That's awesome. That's a lot of
yeah, so
fun.
some guys, like I said, some guys do. I do a guaranteed minimum number of miles. So I have, what do I have? I have 2 AM solos. I have a PM solo. I have two unassigned teams. So I guarantee them a set number of miles per week, as long as they show up to work and they log in on their Omnitracks.
Perfect. That's great. And we've got one more question here. It says basically, are you saying that because we're hopping back earlier when we're talking about the run accounts, are you saying that buying anything short of 4 solo runs is not a great entry into Linehaul? Is that true?
No, I mean, like I said, I mean, it depends on every single person, and it also depends on what your background is, right? Can you buy 2 runs? Well, the minimum you have to do is 2 runs. You cannot become a FedEx contractor without a minimum of 2 runs. Just understand that if you buy 2 runs, you're going to have to be much more involved in the business. So for a lot of outside investors who are coming into the business and who do not have a CDL background, who are not a truck driver, this is kind of a scary proposition. By buying 4 runs, you are able to afford having a manager in place who has a CDL who can handle these situations for you. If you're more than well, I mean, there is an amazing contractor up in, I think she's like in Sammamish, Washington. She started off with 2 tractors. She went out and got her own CDL. She spent 6 months, driving a tractor with a driver, and she paid this driver literally to sit in the passenger seat and teach her how to be a driver so she could get her CDL. And then she handled the business from where she grew it at 2 tractors up to 11. But that was
Mhm.
her choice. Not everybody has that choice or has that desire. Um, I'm just saying that if you buy 2 tractors, the route is probably going to be different. Like if you don't have your own CDL, what you're probably going to want to do is, hopefully have a driver who you can say is you're responsible enough. I think you're going to be my senior driver. As I grow over time, my goal is to eventually make you into my manager. But in the meantime, what I need you to do is I need you to run this run, and I need you to look out for this other driver who's running the other run. And in your free time, I'm going to need you to jockey trucks around for maintenance if there's a maintenance issue. It's just more work. And you have to be much more involved in the business. And you just have to realize that, like right now, there are days where I mean, every single day I work on my business, but I have the ability where I can say I can spend an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours on a Zoom call or on a webinar working because I have a strong infrastructure in place. Now, I've taken a lot of years to build up to this place. At 2 trucks or 3 trucks, even at 4 trucks, you're working in the business. And the goal for you as an investor in this is you want to get to the point where you have the business working for you.
Mhm.
Think about it. Spencer Patton didn't become Spencer Patton by working in his business as, if you talk to him in 2015, did he jump in the delivery van every blue moon? Yes. When, when the sky was falling and, he can tell you horror stories about, having to, not having a driver to run the Magnificent Mile and he driving up to Chicago to
Mhm.
deliver packages on the Magnificent Mile, you know, but that's not what you want to be. You want to be the guy who's actually sitting at a desk or in an office like I am, or wherever you're going to work from, and managing the business and thinking strategically. Okay, how am I going to grow? How am I going to get better financing? How am I going to make more use of my capital?
Exactly. All right, we've got another one here. How common is it for spot runs that are not on the A1 that they don't transition to like a new buyer?
It's very, very rare, but it has happened. So I don't make it a 0% probability. So it's just something to be advised about. Um, that's a conversation that you need to have during your due diligence.
Mhm.
And that's a very, very important part. And that's why due diligence is so, so important. When you negotiate and, Rob Consultants or any, whatever broker that you want to use, when you're doing spots, this is something that you really need to do to dive deep into and understand, okay, I'm buying this business, it's majority of spots, or it's 50% spots, or it's 25% spots. You need to go talk to that P&D manager. Don't talk to the line haul manager. Talk to that P&D manager and say, hey, I'm buying Acme Truck Driving Company. He has these spots in these areas. you know, I want to make sure that if I understand the importance and how integral this is to this station or this hub's business. I'm going to make this a high priority. If I buy this person's business, are the spots going to transition and put that P&D manager or that line haul manager on the spot right then and there and say, hey, I need to know because I'm investing 200, 500, $1 million into this business. And that's the due diligence. That's when you need to start asking questions of FedEx. Because in general, when you go through your AIM meetings, and do they still call them AIM meetings in P&D?
I believe so.
Okay, so when you go through your P&D, when you go through your AIM meetings, which is what they call them on the line haul side, they're going to ask you a lot of questions to make sure that you understand how important it is and how challenging it is to be a line haul contractor. But they'll give you an opportunity where you can ask questions back, and that's where you need to ask those questions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Due diligence is so important in making sure you've got all your ducks in a row ahead of time. I can speak, I would say, I don't know that I've ever seen one of the businesses that we've worked on where the spots did not go with it, but you're exactly right. It's not that it doesn't happen. It's just, it's not super common, but making sure you're doing your due diligence, speaking with the right people and making sure those are, coming over is super important.
And let's put it this way. I mean, FedEx understands how important spots are to the business. And if a contractor is selling, a contractor could be selling for a number of different reasons. Contractor might be getting ready to retire. Remember, RPS was founded in late 1980s. FedEx bought it in 1996. There are still contractors who started off with one tractor. I actually know, I'm really good friends with one who started off with one tractor in 1996 and grown their business to whatever. So think about how long ago 1996 is. So on top of that, so they've been in the business for 25, 30 years. They might be up in age, getting ready to retire. They might be looking to, move, they've decided to make a lifestyle move and they're no longer wanting to live in Chicago. Now they want to live in Orlando, Florida. Well, you know what? Managing spots in Chicago from a remote area is kind of challenging. So maybe they're looking to sell their business in Chicago and move their trucks or move their business to Florida. I know of a very large contractor who started off in Indy, then decided that he wanted to move to Dallas, and so he moved his business to Dallas. And so he has operations in Indy, and then he has operations in Dallas. And then he decided that he wanted to move to the Florida Keys. And guess what? He now runs in the Florida Keys. So, so that's something to think about. And then might be guys who actually are getting, FedEx has said, hey, you know what? We think you might have bitten off more than you can chew. It's time for you to look to sell these runs or these spots before we take them away from you. And so in that situation, they might give a contractor 6 months to a year to sell their business. And then that's where you want to do that due diligence and understand, hey, this guy's got a knock on the shoulder, a tap on the head and said, hey, your safety score is not that great. We're going to give you some time to sell the business. You need to go find a buyer.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like that is all of our questions for today. This is great information. I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did too. I know I did, so I hope everyone did. So we'll go ahead and call it for the day. If anybody has any more questions about spots or Linehaul or FedEx or really anything at all, feel free to email us at info@routeconsultant.com and we can get any questions answered. If you think of them, this afternoon or next week or next month or whatever it is, we are always happy to answer any questions. Or you can join us next week. We have our P&D webinar next week and then another Linehaul the week after that. So looks like that's it for today, and we'll see you next week.